What's up, guys? My name is Doug Polk, and welcome back for another episode of Poker Hands. Today we're going to be taking a look at a hand from the High Roller $250,000 tournament in Australia, and yours truly happens to be involved.
Has won this title twice already, including last year, and that is Phil Ivey. Polk raises it up with ace-4 offsuit. There he is in shot.
Call.
And he makes the call, so they'll go at it again. This time Ivey with a 10 and a 9 offsuit.
Our hand begins with the action folding to me on the button, and I elect to open it up to $55,000 at a $24,000 big blind with ace-4 off. Definitely a standard playing the button to raise when you have an ace in your hand. Certainly going to be strong enough hand to open. The small blind folds, and it's over to Ivey in the big blind, who has 10-9 off. Definitely a clear call when you're facing around a 2.2, 2.3x size open on the button, and we take a flop.
Here comes the flop. There is a 10 there. Well, an interesting flop too. A 10-3 deuce. So Polk with a straight draw and Ivey with top pair. Ivey checks quickly.
Now, Doug can bet here, or he can elect to take a free card for his gut shot straight.
The flop comes 10-3-2, giving Ivey top pair, and me ace high with a gut shot straight draw. Ivey checks to me, and I elect to check it back. Now, I think there could be some merit to betting here on the flop because you improve on a 5 to a hand that can definitely value bet. You improve on an ace to top pair. You improve on a 4 to a fairly good hand. And also, if you can bet and make your opponent fold a hand like Queen Jack, you're actually denying a lot of equity that your opponent might have in the hand. So betting can make some sense. However, one of the problems with betting is if you do bet and they check raise you, you're in a bit of a tough spot. Also, if you bet and they call, they're going to have a lot of pairs in their hand that beat your ace high. I think generally when you have ace high in these spots, you should look to check, but it can be cool to mix up your play there and bet sometimes to keep your opponent off guard. That way you can also barrel on certain turns and actually represent some credible holdings. Anyway, the action goes check, check, and let's take a turn.
The turn, a 2 of hearts. Action on Phil.
Betting 75.
75,000, just a little over half of the pot.
Doug can quite comfortably call here with his ace high. He's going to be ahead not most of the time, but a lot of the time he's going to be ahead. And he's also drawing to an ace or a 5.
Call.
Makes the call, in position.
The turn comes another deuce, and Ivey decides to bet, building the pot with his top pair. He's unlikely to be behind here because if I have a hand stronger than 10-9 in the flop, I'm almost always going to be betting. And additionally, this deuce doesn't really hit me. In fact, what hands can I really have with a deuce in them? Ace-2, King-2 suited, Queen-2 suited. Not many hands, but still a few. He doesn't have to be too worried about the deuce, but he should keep in mind that a deuce is more likely to check back on the flop than bet. It's not that great betting it on the flop because if you bet it and get a fold, you were probably ahead. And if you get check raised, you're in a very dicey spot with your hand. You're not going to know what to do. So he bets here, and he's definitely going to be called by hands like a 3, maybe a hand like 7, some ace highs. And I decided to call with my ace-4. With ace-4 here, you have some good showdown value. You can improve to a value bet and a 5, and you can call down on a river like a 4 or an ace. So you can still improve to some solid hands, and we're going to take a river.
The river is a 6 of clubs, so Ivey's pair of 10s are best. Action is on Phil. Can he get Doug Polk to call here with ace high, depending on the amount?
He could. Yeah, it depends what, how weak Doug sees Ivey as being and what the size of this bet is. Can't really bet too much. He's bet the pot.
Betting 200.
That's almost the pot. So Ivey's taken the line that I want to represent a bluff, basically, to get called by ace high. This is the sort of thinking that these guys are doing. Like, he's put Doug Polk on ace high. Ivey said, I've got top pair, I want to get a call. I'm going to bet the maximum to make it look like I'm actually trying to steal the pot.
And Doug Polk hasn't moved, so Phil Ivey's instincts once again, no surprise. Clearly making Doug Polk think about a call. You can almost hear a pin drop in the room. Doug Polk really considering this call. You're right, Joe.
580,000.
Raise to 580.
Wow, this is a surprise. He's made a raise here.
So he's turned his hand into a bluff, basically.
Phil Ivey hasn't moved, but look at those eyes.
Now, it's actually very simple for Ivey. There's no use raising. He's only going to get called by a better hand. Okay? He believes he's in front. If he does believe he's in front, he can just call and see what happens, right? If he believes he's behind, he can raise now to try and get his opponent to fold. But I think Ivey will just call.
Well, Ivey was caught by surprise there.
I didn't mean to bet 200. I meant to bet 175.
Ivey speaking out loud a little bit. You don't get that very often from Phil.
He just gave up a lot of information there. But I wonder whether that was deliberate to try and get a reaction from Polk.
You can never tell, right? He said, just to be clear, that he said that I meant to bet 175,000.
The river comes in offsuit 6, breaking the backdoor flush draw, and it's not really that crazy of a card. Sure, if Ivey had a hand like 5-4 suited, he got there, and if he had 6-5 suited or 6-4 suited, he hit a pair. But on average, I think Ivey's most likely going to not have improved here. He either has a missed flush draw or some overcards, or he has a hand like a 10 in his value betting, or maybe the occasional straight, set, trips, etc. He's not too likely to have those hands for a lot of the same reasons I'm not that likely to have those hands. Generally speaking, you're not going to play hands with a deuce in them pre-flop, so that's very discounted. At this point, he decides to bet 200,000, which is a pretty reasonable sized bet here on the river, and the action's over to me. Now with ace-4, I have a pretty serious decision. I could elect to really do any of the three options. I could fold, thinking Ivey has too many value bets. I could call, thinking he has too many bluffs, or I could raise, thinking I could get him off off a few value bets as well as his bluffs. Ultimately, I decided that I wanted to raise. And the reason that I felt ace-4 was a good hand to raise with was because having a 4 is actually a pretty good card. I'm now blocking from having a hand like 5-4 suited or maybe 4-2 suited, which would be hands he could definitely be looking to value bet. This raise does put Ivey in a tough spot though. When you have a 10 here and your opponent raises, a lot of players will never bluff. Because sometimes when people think that when they raise, they only represent a few hands, they're scared to bluff because it would be so easy for their opponent to say, I think you're bluffing too much, and call. But good players figure out ways to bluff a few hands, that way they bluff the right amount. Ace-4 is one of the few hands I would choose to bluff with in this spot because I think it makes the most sense. So, with a 10, when you face this raise, you now have kind of an interesting decision. Ivey might not even have to call a hand like 10-9, because if you think about all of the hands Ivey could have here, he could have a deuce, he could have 5-4, he could have a set, he could have some stronger 10s, he could have hands like king 10 or ace 10. So 10-9 is probably one of the worst hands he's betting for value. In general, when your opponent raises, you want to be letting go of some of the worst hands you value bet, because otherwise, you're going to just pay them off too much. Here I risk 580k to win about 480k. That means you can fold about 55% of all of your hands, 60% of all your hands, and be totally okay, because the price I'm laying myself isn't that good. However, there is another thing for Ivey to consider. Maybe he thinks I'm bluffing too much. Maybe he thinks I'm picking too many hands and turning them into bluff raises. And if that's the case, he can certainly decide with hands as weak as 10-9. Also, maybe Ivey would bet with some weaker 10s here. Maybe he'd bet with a 6 here. Maybe he'd go a lot thinner for value. If that's the case, he definitely needs to protect himself by calling with some of his mid to weak 10s. Also, another thing at play here, Ivey might be just staring me down and figuring out exactly what I have.
Trying to elicit a reaction from Doug Polk, perhaps, a tell of some kind.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty futile attempt, but maybe he's just being honest.
Does he got to put the chips in the pot or no when you raise? What's the rule?
Bets at 580.
You can just say it.
Bets fine.
You can just say it without putting the chips in.
Phil Ivey's just asking and clarifying a few tournament rules. As we mentioned earlier, Joe, when they travel, those rules change, so you've got to clarify occasionally.
Yeah, but now that was definitely his searching for information there.
Okay.
He knows that this is now playing poker, right? This is playing with people's minds right
So
now.
you were right the first time. Don't trust them.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't trust poker players.
Yeah, he knows.
Not at the table anyway. confused, frustrated. The tug of war is back, and even Phil Ivey gets it. It's great.
Fold.
Can he do it? Can he convince himself to call? He wants to, he doesn't want to. Do I, don't I? Every poker player in the world faces this, even Phil Ivey.
Okay.
Damn it.
There it is. He makes the call, so he will win a big pot. He almost looked a bit surprised there.
He was resigned to the fact that he's actually lost the hand, to be honest.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Poker Hands. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.